I wrote a blog post a while ago about why I f***ing hate
Harry Potter.
because this is what it does. It appeals to like the male fantasy.
Hello, today I was thinking about how much I can't stand video essays. Then I recalled that one video I made where I said something like everything you like is bad and you should feel bad. Then coincidentally, I happened to stumble upon this video. Hoots over here says that yes indeed, Harry Potter is kind of bad. But is her argument convincing? Well, let's find out, shall we? Right off the bat, I'm going to be skipping a good bulk of this video. It's an hour long and ain't no one got time for all of that. I want to mainly focus on her arguments, if they're even good arguments, and why I should be ashamed to even like Harry Potter. So we're off to a great start. She starts the video off e-begging. I'm skipping it. Nothing wrong with getting your YouTube coin, it's just kind of pathetic to me, but to each their own. Next is a brief history lesson, which I'm also skipping because that has nothing to do with the topic at hand. This is the biggest thing I hate about video essays. They always throw in history lessons like that's going to somehow persuade people into agreeing with them. That their subjective opinion about the topic at hand is correct in any way. All you're doing is padding out this already incredibly long video with something you didn't really need to add in the first place. And I say this not just to be a hater, but because I already know the history of Harry Potter. Most people watching this YouTube video are, and I'm assuming here, probably already familiar with the source material. That's why they're watching this. For validation, and for people who are genuinely curious whether the Harry Potter franchise is worth investing time into, I recommend to always just watch it yourself. Form your own opinion, that's the best advice I can give you. This is 5 minutes into the video. That's not bad, honestly. The little preamble building up to her argument isn't as long as I thought it'd be. Some video essays don't start getting to their arguments until you're 10 minutes in. I think this is also a me problem, because I feel like lately I just want to fast forward through everything. I'm like that Adam Sandler movie Click, only with no job, no wife, no kids. Just Adam Sandler. We're almost at the meat of the video. Our first stop, we have to dismiss some of the more what Hoots deems are shallow criticisms of the series. Let's get into it. Also maybe put a white outline around the text so you can actually read it. Like that.
The danger and mystery of Hogwarts is a feature, not a bug.
Got it. Next.
The wizarding world is supposed to exist parallel to the non-wizarding world, which is itself pretty patriarchal, especially in Great Britain. So I think criticizing wizarding institutions for not having gender parity or whatever is sort of invalid.
Why? Elaborate.
There's definitely a conversation to be had about the ways Rowling fails to critique that institutional sexism and the ways her particular brand of liberal, not like the other girls, feminism is lacking and tinged with a fair bit of its own sexism. But to criticize the wizarding world itself for being a mirror to our own, I think is to misunderstand what the wizarding world is meant to represent.
By what it's meant to represent, she means the patriarchy. I don't know, I watched this clip like 5 times over. I thought the wizarding world was supposed to be about kids going to wizard school and learning how to control their powers. Boy, how wrong I was.
It's set in a high school. You've got your central cast, your nerds, your preppy rich kids, and your stoners. Next.
The purpose of the sorting hat was just a way to sort what dorms the kids would stay in. Life within the houses doesn't constitute their whole social lives. It's a little more nuanced than just high school, cliques, next. It's not the most complex system. They could have just assigned it like how colleges do. But what's the fun in that?
A lot of people have taken issue with Harry's close relationship with Dumbledore, determining that it's at best unfair to other Hogwarts students and at worst kind of creepy.
He gave Harry special attention for the plot. His intentions aren't revealed until he meets his demise, where we find out that he was manipulating Harry from the start. If anything, he's not really even a good character.
In service of Harry's coming-of-age narrative, he kind of needs a wise older mentor to help him on his way.
Kind of like how kids need teachers to guide them. Almost like he's a student going to school, in that kind of way. Who would have thought?
And with the people reading something sinister into it, I also just can't help but feel like there's some kind of latent homophobia there. Like, I know Dumbledore isn't written to be explicitly gay.
He wasn't written to be gay at all in the original series.
Pretty common knowledge now that he is.
After the fact, when Rowling retconned the entire series.
Reading his interactions as creepy or predatory in any way just feels like a hell of a projection to me. I think this is fine, personally.
She does not really give a good response as to why it's a shallow complaint. My take is, it's what Rowling knows, and it works. However you feel about capitalism doesn't really matter. Harry Potter barely focuses on the economy anyways.
I don't think J.K. Rowling is particularly adept at complex world building.
Maybe not complex, but let's face it. Harry Potter changed how we see magical lore and wizards. Your own set is inspired by the wizarding world. She might not be the best author, but she did shape a lot of people's childhoods, whether we like it or not.
And she's at her best when she's playing a very simple game of what would the wizarding version of this conventional thing look like? Joanne, please sound off in the comments if you have an answer to this very important question.
Joanne, will you please stand up?
Okay. Let's dive into some of the troubling elements of the wizarding world of Harry Potter.
It took 10 minutes, but now we're here, baby.
Coming out swinging with one of the worst aspects of the wizarding world. So the house elves are a magical race of chattel slaves.
This might be insensitive on my part, but this is such a non-issue. Of all the reasons you could hate Harry Potter, a character being an indentured servant isn't a valid one. For one thing, looking past the fact that we're critiquing fiction, not every character in a story is going to be a free agent. No pun intended there. What I mean is, you're going to have characters that face hardships that are beyond your control. Also, indentured servants still exist in this day and age. It's just a part of the narrative. Whether that's a reason you want to no longer support the franchise, it's up to you. I personally gave up after all the anti-trans stuff Rowling started spewing.
The issue of race within the sci-fi and fantasy genres has always been fraught. Way better writers than J.K. Rowling, and way worse ones, have stumbled over the depiction of fantasy and human races alike. The primary antagonist in the Harry Potter series is a fascist who would like to create a wizard ethno-state, so racial tension and racism are sort of integral to the plot. And it is handled poorly.
In your opinion, that's what this is. I'm not the one making a video essay on why this series is bad. Hoots is.
The racial classifications of witches and wizards are a little underexamined. Again, characters we are supposed to like are a little casually bigoted toward non-magical people, Muggle and Squib alike, in a way that doesn't get commented on or rectified. And we get to see how racial caste intersects with class somewhat, but we don't get to see how those wizarding castes intersect with other avenues of marginalization.
Because it's not important to the plot. It's just part of the world building. Racism exists. And if we're being honest, it's not just racism, but speciesism as well. Or I don't know, creatureism. Hobbit shaming. There were hobbits in Harry Potter, right? Please don't take that last part literally, it was a joke.
But Rowling's framing is, at least in the broadest strokes, critical of racism when it comes to the characters she perceives as human.
Because that's what matters to her. She's the author. That's just the truth. I'm not saying it's not fucked up that she doesn't care about the other species, though. Like, don't get it twisted. She continues with the racism stuff. It's a small part of the bigger picture. The story of Harry Potter is about wizards and shit. If a small part of it where humans treat fantasy characters like fantasy characters bothers you, I'd suggest investing into a different series. Like, Pokemon. No. Lord of the Rings. No. Game of Thrones. No, there's racism and slavery in that too. Huh. Strange. It's almost like a lot of fantasy-based stories have similar motifs. Weird.
Oh no. Anyway.
However, Azkaban has drawn more real-life comparisons to another American detention center, Guantanamo Bay.
Well, yeah, because that's what it was based on. You could even say it was subtly based on Alcatraz. But I digress. I guess that makes Harry Potter terrible then. Let's pack it up, boys.
You see, Azkaban is not just a prison, but a torture facility guarded by creatures known as Dementors.
What's the very, very worst thing about prison?
Don't encourage him, Dwight.
The worst thing about prison was the Dementors!
And while most of the witches and wizards imprisoned in Azkaban are guilty of the most heinous crimes a magical person can commit, torture, murder, being a magical Nazi, some are serving their time for crimes like illegal possession of exotic magical creatures, or trapping their muggle neighbor in a teapot. Not that I think torture is acceptable for offenses like murder either, just that it feels like an especially out of proportion response to wacky hijinks involving an annoying neighbor in a tea set.
Real prisons operate like that too. If recent incarceration rates remain unchanged, an estimated 1 of every 20 persons, 5.1%, will serve time in a prison during their lifetime.
Permeating throughout the Harry Potter series, there's this attitude of deference, but also detachment from wizarding institutions that is very unsettling. No one, not even our audience insert character Harry,
Calling the chosen one cliché main character of the franchise an audience insert is a choice I'm slowly morphing into cinema sins. Next thing you know, I'm going to start putting little bell noises after every rebuttal I make.
is interested in knowing how anything works. Nobody is really that curious as to why or how magic works. I mean, no one is applying the scientific method to it.
Because it's magic. The whole point of Harry Potter is that our self-insert character, aptly named Insert Potter, goes off to wizarding school so he can learn how to practice magic and Satanism.
Witches and wizards are just out here like, some people are magical and some people aren't. No one knows why. Oh well, guess we'll never know.
Exactly.
Nobody really stopped to think about all the weaknesses within these institutions that made them especially easy targets for fascists.
This is such a weird thing to complain about. It's like complaining about Star Wars being about a group of people rebelling against an empire. Like, what are you realistically expecting from this series? The main story, if you want to get down to brass tacks, is about a kid who learns how to be a wizard and defeats an evil villain in the end. Is the complaint against self-insert Potter that the world he lives in isn't utopian? A lot of stories have characters who come from broken homes or dystopian futures or whatever. The part of the story that's intriguing is how our protagonists deals with those situations, not how better written the background setting could have been.
Harry grows up and leaves Hogwarts and becomes an Auror, a wizard cop, the avatar, the chief enforcer of the status quo. And I think that's very revealing about both the personal politics of J.K. Rowling and also some of the more general neoliberal attitudes of the 1990s.
He didn't just up and leave Hogwarts, he graduated. What was he supposed to do? Self-insert wanted to be an Auror most likely because of his motivation to protect his loved ones, as well as utilize his talents for defensive magic. It doesn't sound like a real enforcer of the status quo to me. I'm not letting that self-insert comment go, by the way. That was really funny. Also, the more I read into it, I feel like Auror were more like detectives than they were just basic cops, since they were specialized in dealing with dangerous dark witches and wizards. Like how detectives Benson and Elliot are specialized in sex crimes. I've been watching a lot of Law and Order lately. I feel like Rowling just wanted self-insert to have a career and a future. No matter what he became, he would have had to continue his education outside of Hogwarts anyways.
A few moments later.
Where was I?
I honestly don't know.
In the summer of 1989, when it was becoming clear that the Berlin Wall was about to become the Berlin landfill, American political scientist Francis Fukuyama published an essay titled, "The End of History?"
What the hell is this?
Fukuyama's End of History is illustrative of a kind of liberal attitude that seeped into every aspect of culture in the late 1980s and into the 1990s. And I think it's an attitude that is very much felt in the Harry Potter series more generally, and also in J.K. Rowling's ultimate vision of the wizarding world.
In your opinion, what does any of this have to do with why Harry Potter is subjectively bad? Like, okay, maybe Rowling used something a political scientist wrote as a reference for her series. And what of it? You think George Lucas made Star Wars up entirely out of his ass? It was based on the old movie serial Flash Gordon and the guerrilla warfare during Vietnam, among other things. Does that make it the worst thing I've ever had the misfortune of ever seeing in my life? Maybe, but as of now, I'm convinced that the series of movies I liked to watch as a kid while procrastinating on my homework maybe isn't so bad, and that maybe I shouldn't feel bad. Well, not yet anyways, let's continue. I'm not even halfway through the video yet.
And as low as my opinion of J.K. Rowling might be, I don't think that all of those horrible aspects of the wizarding world are a consequence of her tacitly endorsing them. Some of them sure are. But I think, as with Fukuyama and to an extent Leibniz, Rowling suffers from something of a lack of imagination.
Her lack of imagination changed the literary world forever. The Harry Potter books and movies popularized the fantasy genre among children and young adults. Many also found a love for reading through the series. Can't say you're doing anything other than complaining about a fantasy series being unoriginal. Kind of a based reason to hate something, lol. A lot of successful things are trite and unoriginal. Anyone remember Twilight?
Please don't come for me, Harry Potter fans.
It's too late for that.
I know she has demonstrated a lot of imagination when it comes to, like, Bertie Bott's every flavored beans or Quidditch or whatever else it is you guys go nuts for.
Yeah, that's not condescending.
But there are limits. There are blind spots in her imagination that lead to some problems in the writing.
Y'all don't even know how much I edited out, and we're still at 30 minutes.
Famously, Joanne wrote her Harry Potter books to grow up with the reader, and later entries in the series get darker and more complicated and longer than earlier entries.
I think Joanne just got lucky that Harry Potter blew up the way it did. I doubt she thought she'd wind up writing one of the best-selling series of all time. Before Rowling ever got published, her scripts were rejected 12 times.
And I believe she was trying to be critical of Wizarding Society and to illustrate the ways it already reflected Voldemort's vision of the world. But I don't think she knew how to undo it, other than just by putting characters that she assured us were the good guys in positions of power, either because of her own limitations as a writer or because of her personal politics.
A lot of authors write stories from their own personal experiences. It's not specific to Rowling, but we can't deny just how much success she found with her book series. Whether we personally agree or disagree about the quality of her work, it wouldn't negate the fact it's popular, successful, and entertaining. She goes on to list plot holes about time turners. There's plot holes in the series, I'm not going to argue that. Yes, it's bad writing. But does that make the overall series bad? No, not really.
In the 5th book, Joanne included a scene in which the children are fighting wizard Nazis at the Ministry of Magic, and during the fight, they knock all of the time turners off of a shelf. All of them. All of the time turners in existence were all sitting on the same shelf, and they knocked over the time turner shelf. And the time turners get stuck on an infinite loop of time turning themselves and become completely unusable. It's so lazy and so funny.
I understand why she had to write out the time turners though, 'cause you could just literally undo all of the bad things that happen in your story. That's why writing time paradoxes is always so hard in fiction, 'cause there's always problems with it in terms of continuity. She brings up Cedric's death, which was something that needed to happen to show how much of a force Voldemort was. If you could just undo his death, then Voldemort wouldn't really be much of a threat. Which goes back to my theory that Joanne didn't plan out these books, well, until like the 3rd one anyways. I googled it just to make sure, and apparently her main ideas were the first 3 books.
The next thing she does is write the story that ended up being developed into the stage play, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child.
Okay, so I thought going into this video that this was just going to be about the main 8 Harry Potter movies. It's not. The Cursed Child is trash. That does not in any way diminish the quality of the original 8 films.
One of the most common critiques of J.K. Rowling's writing is her incessant need to retcon or add paratextual details to the story. Sometimes this is just unnecessary world building, like tweeting out that wizards used to shit their pants and vanish the evidence. The most infamous example is, of course, the gaying of Albus Dumbledore.
I didn't realize she was going to bring this up. I accidentally already referenced this earlier in the video. Whoops.
But the Harry Potter series isn't the only Wizarding Universe franchise where we see Albus Dumbledore. He's a central character in the Fantastic Beasts franchise, and his lover, Gellert Grindelwald, is the series' chief antagonist.
The retcon after the series already ended was silly in retrospect, but the Fantastic Beasts, which is a prequel series to Harry Potter, is not Harry Potter. It's a prequel series. Those movies are not the best. I honestly consider Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts to be two separate film franchises. It's like with Lord of the Rings, there's the main series then the Bilbo Hobbit spin-off series. But to be fair here, if we are going to count Fantastic Beasts as a mainstay of Harry Potter movies, then of the 11 movies, 9 of them were pretty good. I'll give the benefit of the doubt to the first Fantastic Beasts movie. But that third one, don't even get me started on the Chillins.
We have been assured a hot lovers to enemies storyline, and we have been denied yet again.
That's not a good reason to hate a series. And this is coming from me, a bona fide hater extraordinaire.
Joanne's laziness when it comes to world building has gotten her into trouble.
By lazy world building, she means like different Hogwarts castles not being in enough different diverse countries around the world. This is a detail I couldn't possibly care any less about. The main focus is England for the most part. She also goes on to talk about 2 specific characters being racist stereotypes, which I'm not going to defend, but then doesn't bring up Rowling infamously making Voldemort's Snake Nagini an Asian actress in the Fantastic Beasts movies.
We have so much to get to. Okay, I'm gonna start speeding through everything.
Now we're going to start speeding through everything, only 40 minutes later.
J.K. Rowling's writing is laced with a disturbing amount of cruelty around fatness and fat people.
That's not specifically just a Rowling-only problem. A lot of movies, books, and TV shows do this. It's getting better now, however, but fat phobia is a real problem that's existed for decades.
A very interesting thing in light of J.K. Rowling's personal politics is how unsympathetic women in the Harry Potter series are often described as having masculine features, like strong jawlines or mannish hands.
Hoots goes on to describe Rowling as basically pretty misogynistic in terms of depicting women. I don't know if I even really agree with this sentiment. Yes, she does write some women to have, quote, mannish features, end quote. But that exists in real life. There's women who have Adam's apples and square jaws in real life. And then she goes on to say that some of the female characters were written just to be the butt of jokes. Hate to break it to you, but that is mostly what Ron Weasley is, as well as some other male characters in the series. This honestly boils down in how you perceive these characters. Because I can sit here and argue away why I don't see Hermione as a sexist depiction of a girl, but someone else can argue that she is, and we'll never get anywhere. This is how we as individuals perceive how characters are written. And even if some of the women in Harry Potter are written misogynistically, does that take away from how good of a narrative the series is? To me it doesn't, but then again I'm not viewing the series as reprehensible misogynistic garbage.
Some of the problems in the writing I just mentioned can be chalked up to talent or bad artistic choices or whatever, but Joanne Rowling's work is infused with her personal politics.
I'm going to add here that I personally do not give a fuck what J.K. Rowling's personal politics are, and that I don't care for her as a person. With that said, I'm always going to have a fondness for the Harry Potter movies, based on my experiences and nostalgia with the franchise. But it brings up the argument, can you separate the art from the artist? I flip-flop on my answer to this question constantly, because the truth is I honestly don't know what the right answer is. So I guess the most effective answer I can come up with is that it's a case-by-case basis. However, a lot of people aren't like me and can't separate J.K. Rowling from Harry Potter, and I respect that. She does heavily identify with the series. I mean, it's her baby after all. To me, my philosophy on art is that once it's out there, it's not yours anymore, but I understand not everyone thinks like me.
Just try not to give her your money. Buy the books secondhand and buy unlicensed merch by independent artists on Etsy. and pirate the movies in Minecraft.
Hilarious. The last few minutes of this are end credits. So for a quick TLD, does Hoots in any way persuade me to think that the Harry Potter series is bad? Nope. And Rowling is a transphobe and shitty person in real life, which has nothing to do with how a decade-old film that came out before Rowling made her shitty views public should be perceived. Thank you and good night. Don't forget to tell me in the comments how much of a dumb fuck I am.